Could the Golden Gophers start the season off 4-0? We're jumping into that today, and we got to talk about NCAA 25, where they went right with the Gophers and where they went wrong.
You are Locked On Golden Gophers, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Golden Gophers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Gopher fans? You're listening to Locked On Golden Gophers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name's Kane Rob, host of the podcast, former collegiate football video coordinator and recruiting assistant, here to talk Golden Gophers with you each and every day of the week, Monday through Friday. But in the offseason, we've been a little bit off. It's been here and there. It's been 3 days a week for the most part. And once we get back to this August grind, I'm telling you, 5 days a week, breaking down everything you could talk about with every Gopher opponent, every position group, and more, and ranking all the position groups in the Big Ten. So you're definitely going to want to hit subscribe over on YouTube so you don't miss any of that Gophers daily content moving forward. But today, we're going to talk about NCAA 25 and where the Gophers ratings went right and wrong, and also what they got right and wrong in the game with the Gophers. On top of that, we're going to talk about, could the Gophers start this season, 2024, 4-0, and put themselves into a very good position when it comes to bowl eligibility and what have you, especially for many books out there having them between 4.5 and 5.5 wins. That would put them 1 win, 2 wins away from smashing the over on both of those bets. And then we're also going to talk about Cam Christie and how he is doing in the summer league as the latest Gopher drafted to the NBA. We're doing that all today, so sit back, relax, be sure to hit subscribe over on YouTube. But first, let's start it off with, could the Gophers start this season 4-0? Let's look at the first 6 games of the season. In my opinion, they could make a really interesting case for Minnesota to be a sleeper team in the season of 2024. Now, when you're looking at everything, you're looking at, could they realistically start 4-0? I don't think it is a far stretch or outlandish to say. If you look at the opponents of those games, you have North Carolina to kick it off on Thursday night in week 1 of college football. Then you've got Rhode Island at home. Then you've got Nevada, and then you've got Iowa. Now, of those first 4 games, I would say the biggest challenge is definitely the Gophers' rival in the Hawkeyes. But luckily, when you're looking at all 4 of these games, every single one of them to kick off the season is at home at Huntington Bank Stadium, where the Gophers hopefully will have a slight advantage with the crowd on their side. Now, you're talking about, again, North Carolina, good team last year, especially with Drake May, but they lose Drake May. The quarterback position looks like it could be transferred Max Johnson, but they've got Colin? Can't remember off the top of my head. Harrell, who is also the quarterback there. He was with the team last year, so maybe he could end up starting. He played in the bowl game last year. 2 quarterbacks, don't really know what you're going to get from them. They still got a good tight end in Nesbitt. They've got an all-American style running back in Hampton, so they've still got talent on that North Carolina team. They are no slouch. It will be a good game regardless, but hopefully the Gophers can pull that off. You've got Rhode Island and Nevada, your next 2 games. Both of those need to be, not should be, need to be absolute domination for the Gophers, need to be like explosion 30-point wins for the Golden Gophers. Now, we saw that in the 2022 season, but we didn't see a whole lot of the just straight butt whoopings in 2023. Now, there were occasional games where Minnesota would pull away late in Eastern Michigan and Louisiana. Those games, the Gophers made the scoreboard look bigger than it was, but especially the Louisiana game, it was a lot closer in the first half, and then they pulled away after that. I am talking about Rhode Island and Nevada. You need to be winning by double-digit scores before halftime, plain and simple, and you need to keep a double-digit win throughout the rest of the game. Now, I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I am being realistic. For a power conference school that is in the top 2 conferences in the entire country, you have to dominate those type of opponents. So the Gophers better to have at least 2 wins in their first 4 games, and you're talking about the other 2. Can they pull them off? So like I said, North Carolina kicks it off, and then Iowa is the end of that 4-game stretch. Now, you have 2 cakewalks, 2 challenging games. And if they do win all 4 and they find themselves beating a rival that, I'm going to guess Iowa starts off ranked, having been a 10-11 win team last season, only losing 2 conference games, one against Michigan and one against Minnesota. Yeah. That's right. I said it, but won against Michigan and Minnesota, and then they also had a bowl game loss against Tennessee. So they had 3 losses on the year, but Iowa had a good season overall, especially when you give consideration to the fact that their quarterback play was atrocious. Their offense was atrocious, but they still found a way to get like 11 wins on the season. So I was going to start this season ranked. And if they can hold on to their opening games and go to week 4 against the Gophers holding a ranked position, and the Gophers beat a challenging North Carolina team and then take care of business against the other two, if the Gophers pull off a win and go 4-0 to kick off this season, maybe the Gophers find themselves in the rankings in that early parts of the season. Now that could be nice overall. That could be helpful overall. I believe the Gophers never saw the rankings at all last season. They saw it a little bit in 22 before end up losing those rankings, I believe, against Purdue. But it would be nice to see the Gophers creep back into the top 25 in the country and hopefully be able to maintain it or have a few weeks in the top 25. Now, that being said, like I said, Minnesota maybe could find themselves in the ranking. If Iowa is still ranked, then yes, I think if they go 4-0, they would find themselves into the 20s somewhere in the rankings. But that being said, when we're talking about the first 6 games, then Minnesota goes on their first road game of the season, and it is in a hostile environment with Michigan, who will likely be highly ranked coming off a national championship season. Even though they lost a lot of players, they're still going to be a highly ranked team. But does the committee automatically remove Minnesota if they drop that first road game against Michigan? That would be a high quality opponent. Now, logic would say you shouldn't. They're playing another highly ranked team. They've played 2 really challenging teams and they've already beat them. And then they lose to a challenge in Michigan. Yes, they should still be in the 20s and they should prove it again the next week against USC. But if they lose in that Michigan game, I would not be surprised to see a committee be like, oh, see, we were right. They're not for real. And they would pull them out. Because the Gophers just don't get love like that when it comes from the media or the national pollings or what have you. But then you come back home versus USC. Now, if they do somehow leave the Gophers ranked in their 4-1 heading into a home game versus USC, USC could already be feeling a rough season, a rough transition to the Big Ten at this point, because they have a very hard schedule to kick off the season, in my opinion. Now, this could be a double-edged sword for the Gophers playing USC and potentially being a ranked or on the verge of ranked team, because they would be 4-1 at this point if they beat those first 4 teams, start 4-0, and then they lose to Michigan. It would be a double-edged sword because in the preseason, I'm guessing USC is going to be in the rankings. I think they're going to be in the lower half of the rankings, but they're going to get love for Lincoln Riley and for what the past has done with him in the last 2 years. Now, that being said, in the preseason, USC is probably going to be favored against Minnesota. But by the time in the season that Minnesota and the USC Trojans end up playing, USC could very well be 1-3 on the year. Now, how crazy does that sound? Well, overall, they're starting off the season playing LSU. Then they got to play Michigan, and then they have Wisconsin in their first 4 games as well. The only other game in there is Utah State, who wasn't too bad on their own last year. So I think Utah State loses to USC, but the other 3 could realistically be losses for USC, meaning if they were coming to Minnesota at a 1-3 record, and if, big if, Minnesota was 4-1 at that point, and then they lose to USC at home, well, all the buildup, all the hype that could have been surrounding the Gophers as a sleeper team, as a team to be on the lookout for, it could all zap just like that if they lose to a team that is 1-3. But if they do win that game, a lot of people are going to talk about, well, Minnesota hasn't played quality opponents because USC is bad. You look at it, they're 1-4 on the season. They were supposed to win that game. So either way, win or lose, Minnesota won't get enough credit for that USC game as they possibly should. Now, if USC comes out and they beat LSU and they beat Wisconsin, they lose to Michigan, they're 3-1 also. That could be one heck of a game. That could be a game that maybe game day or somebody is like, look, we want to get this on a major network because these are 2 teams that we didn't foresee being big time challengers at very good records, only both teams having lost to Michigan. That could be a fun story. That could be a fun energy heading into that game, but that's just the world of college football. You never know what you're going to get. Now, a lot of people can say, oh, the Gophers will be not favored or they're going to lose games, blah, blah, blah. That's why you play the games on Saturdays. So that being said, Minnesota, if they are able to pull out a USC and they are able to pull off those first 4 games and they start 5-1, that's not out of the question. But Is it favorable? Probably not. But the UNC, Iowa, and USC games, in my opinion, through the first 6, I think Minnesota can win 2 of those 3 games. And if they do, I would not be shocked in the slightest. But ultimately, going 4-2 in those first 6 games is still not bad. If you have Michigan, USC, UNC, and Iowa, and you go 4-2 after getting those 2 better be auto wins, so that means you win 2 of those 4 games and go 4-2 in your first 6 games. That would be a good start for the Gophers. If that happens, we need to hope and pray that Minnesota wins the games it's supposed to, a la UCLA, a la Illinois, a la Maryland at home, and possibly a la Rutgers, depending on how they're playing or if they've gone back to the older ways of Rutgers. If Minnesota takes care of those 4 games, you're already looking at a team that could win 8+ games on the season. That's not taking into account your other matchup with your rival in Wisconsin and what have you. So Minnesota could realistically be a sleeper team, a sneaky team for the Big Ten this year. Could they have another 8+ win season? I think they can if they take care of the games that they're supposed to. And that's a big if, because they haven't been able to do that every single time over the past 4 years or so. Now, this is slightly an optimistic outlook, but again, not beyond the realm of possibility or reality. So with a lot of returning production, the Gophers could seriously surprise many people, many pundits, many analysts, many fans outside of Minneapolis, but I would not be too shocked to see the Gophers go 4-0 to start off the season. What do you think? Let me know down in the comments below. But we're going to move on to the NCAA 25 game and what the Gophers ratings look like. Did we get some love? Did we get some hate? A little bit of both, and I'm going to tell you why coming up next. First, let's talk about our friends over at FanDuel, because right now it is summertime. It feels like sports have winded down a little bit, but you've still got golf, you've still got baseball, you've still got WNBA, and the summer league is in full swing. So there are opportunities for you to really go out there and have sports be sporting like you want them to. Now, yes, you don't have football yet. Yes, you don't have college basketball or NBA or anything like you, but NHL for those folks as well. But FanDuel lets you keep the sports going whenever you want. So even if those sports that are going right now currently aren't your cup of tea, you can still open the FanDuel app and dream up bets anytime that you are in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a bonus or a boost on the daily. That's right. So there is something for everyone every single day, all summer long. So head on over to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer. Right now, I keep taking a look at the NBA championship odds, and I love seeing my squad, the Celtics, up at the top, but I also think the Timberwolves aren't getting enough love in those odds. They made subtle moves. Joe Ingles was a move I kind of liked. Overall, Ant looks like a dominant force in USA basketball, and I think that's going to transition over to the season. So I like the Timberwolves. I think they got a feel for the Western Conference Finals this year, and I think they could put it together and find themselves in the finals. So if you think it's the year next year, now's a chance to take a look over on at FanDuel. I believe they have the tied for 5th best odds in the NBA right now. So head on over to FanDuel.com. Like I said, FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball and of Locked On. All right, Gopher Sense, let's talk about the NCAA 25 game and where your Golden Gophers have had some positives on the game and some negatives, but people have been waiting for this game for a dang near a decade. So I want to talk about what they got right, what they got wrong when it comes to your Minnesota Golden Gophers. Now, if you've been living under a rock, it's time to wake up. The early release of NCAA 25 has officially dropped, and I think it's safe to say that EA really didn't give Minnesota a lot of effort into the extra moments of the thing. Now, you've got moments with Florida or Georgia or other schools where you have their entrance and coming out of the stadium or the locker room and things like that, and you feel the real atmosphere. You have the wave in the Iowa games. You have Jump Around playing, even though it's not Jump Around, it's a different song, but they have the moment with Wisconsin and what have you. Now, the Minnesota one, it was a little bit of a letdown for me because I'm thinking you're going to see PJ Fleck, and well, you can't see PJ Fleck because they don't have the coaches in the game, but you're going to see the Minnesota Gophers walking down the tunnel with all the oars on the wall and get that hype and that atmosphere going, and you'll see them stop at the end of the tunnel and they'll start doing the sway. And all of a sudden they'll get the conducting and they'll sprint out onto the field. It shouldn't be that hard, right? Well, they didn't. They gave the Gophers a generic entrance. Now they looks like they are in the position to do the sway before they run on the field, but they don't really even have them sway, and they have them just casually run out on the field and what have you. And the thing that makes it a little bit disappointing from the Gophers' perspective is seeing your Iowa intricacies, seeing your Wisconsin intricacies, and then all of a sudden you look at this Minnesota Gophers one that should be pretty easy. And you see they use the same one for multiple schools. I've seen Iowa State have the same entrance. I've seen UCLA have the same entrance. I've seen Bowling Green have the same entrance. So that was a little bit of a letdown when it came to the Gophers in this game. Now, some of the positives for this EA game include the uniforms are fire. The Gophers have 13 options when it comes to uniform choices, which is one of the biggest on the game. And Oregon has a ton, but I love to see that the Gophers have a ton of options as well. The new uniforms are on the game. The Chrome Domes, which everybody was obsessed with and was like, they need to be on the game. And if you look at the title menu and you look, it's like, oh, they don't have them. But if you actually select the Chrome helmet, even though it doesn't look like it in the game jersey options, it is when you get on the field, and it is chef's kiss. A lot of people were talking about, oh, we don't even have the Gopher head logo. They do. You just have to see it on the other side of the helmet. They've even got the Goldie with the sweater running on the option for the helmets as well. So there are a ton of uniform combinations. They've got the black helmet, but not quite the black jerseys. But what I have read is said that they will be releasing some more jerseys in the updates of the game. So we could see black jerseys for Minnesota. Maybe Minnesota pulls out new black jerseys this season, and that's why they're not on the game quite yet, because they weren't going to put the old ones and they're waiting to reveal the new ones. So overall, I think they really hit with the Gophers uniform options. Also, the stadium looks legit. They've had the stripe out in the game, a maroon out, a gold out. So you love to see those options. Then all of a sudden, they also show fans. So when you travel, I had the Gophers go to UCLA and go to the Rose Bowl, and all of a sudden you see a spectacle of Gophers at a UCLA home game, have you, but you see that gold standing out in the crowd. You see a whole conglomerate of a student, or not a student section, but a fan section for the opposing fans of all Gophers. And that was really cool to see as well. The fans travel well. Now, I appreciate the 82 overall rating. I think it could have been a little bit higher as you look across the conference. If you're looking across the entire Big Ten Conference, you've got Ohio State and Oregon at 93. Makes sense. You've got Penn State and Michigan up next at an 88. Again, that makes sense. Then you go on to USC, Wisconsin, and Iowa all at 87. Okay, I'm not even going to be mad at that. Next up is Nebraska at an 84, and this is where I think the Gophers should be when it relates to the success that they've had in the past seasons, the success that they have in starting production coming back, and what have you. But the Gophers are at an 82, and they're tied with Purdue, Rutgers, UCLA, Washington, and Indiana. Now, I think the Gophers are all above those teams, maybe not Rutgers or Washington. Maybe they're in the same ballpark as Rutgers and Washington, but I say then you move Minnesota, Rutgers, and Washington up to that Nebraska level of an 84. And I feel like that feels more realistic and more like the better fit when it comes to the overall rankings. Then you've got Michigan State, Illinois, Maryland, and Northwestern all at an 80. That's how the top 10 or the Big Ten ranks out for the ratings of overall teams. Now, the negatives of the NCAA game when it comes to your Gophers. First off, Max Brosmer gets zero love with his rating. Only Big Ten starters that are lower than Max Brosmer is Northwestern starter, Rutgers with Ethan Kaliakmanis, and that's it. Those are the only two starters in the entire Big Ten that are lower than Max Brosmer. You've got two other schools that are tied with him in Iowa, who had the worst quarterback play of the entire conference last year, and Maryland, who have a transfer and an unknown going for them. But we're talking about an FCS transfer that has production and has elite play under his belt in 2 seasons, not just 1 season. But all of a sudden, how in the world are you looking at Ethan Garbers, who hasn't really truly showed a whole lot, at an 84 when Max Brosmer is at a 77? How do you have Luke Altmaier, who didn't look that great besides maybe scrambling occasionally for Illinois, at an 81? Hudson Card at an 82. Tyler Van Dyke, who struggled with Miami, at an 83. And Curtis Rourke, who played in a lower competition as well, at an 84. But Max is 77. I'm not even trying to hate on the others besides Garbers. I think that one is absolutely wild. But let's at least make Max Brosmer an 80. I mean, even Connor Bazelak, the starting quarterback for Bowling Green that the Gophers just beat in the bowl game without any quarterback, is an 80 overall. So come on, EA. I think that's a little bit disrespectful to Max Brosmer. Other things where they dropped the ball. Dallas Sims is still on the Gophers roster. He transferred way back in like April, so that's kind of weird. Kind of bogus to have one Redding brother on the game and not the other. The Gophers intro, like I said, it's kind of generic, so that was unfortunate. Now, prominent players or high recruits that aren't on the Gophers roster as of right now: Jalen Logan Redding, Darius Green, both of those players being starters for the Gophers last year, they opted out. You've got Marcus Major and Christian Driver, both transfer players coming in from Penn State and Oklahoma, not in the game, opted out. And then you've got high quality freshmen that I heard that they're still putting some freshmen in the game, so maybe they're still working on these ones. But Riley Sunrum, Brett Carroll, both 4-star guys, are not on the game right now. And then Mike Gerald is another freshman that isn't on the game or listed. And then finally, Nuke Hayes, who could be a big feature for the Gophers coming up this year, and Aiden Gooseby, who got some prominent playing time on the defense before injury last year. All of those players either opted out or are not in the game as it stands. Now, like I said, you're missing many freshmen and walk-ons, but it's partially understood because you only get 85 players on the game. Now, the players that they did justice for the Gophers in this game: Darius Taylor, 88 overall. He's a beast. He's easy to move with. And even Chris Bell tweeted that Darius Taylor is literally the best player on the game to use. Justin Wally, 86 overall, has the ball hawk ability. Love to see it. Kesich, Joyner, Daniel Jackson, all 85s. And then Lindenberg, Carroll, and Cooper are all above the 80s at an 81 or 82. Now, I pat myself in the back here because I went 9 for 9 on the players that the Gophers have rated an 80 or above. No more, no less. I got it spot on. So I would say EA Sports did pretty well there. But then younger players, Kerry Brown, Coleman Bryson, Nathan Roy, Corey Parrish, Jackson Howard, Anthony Smith, Zaquan Bryan, Maverick Baranowski, Philip Daniels, young Gophers core, players that could be starters next season, see huge roles this season, maybe even some of them starters this season. They all ended up in the 74 to 76 in the ratings. Now, I love some of the speed ratings for some of those guys. Realistic, the guys who had good track speeds in high school, you're seeing it reflected in the game, but not all the speeds are accurate. So the players that had ratings that were disrespectful or maybe didn't hit the ball quite or hit the mark quite as well. Christian Hoskins, speaking of speed, he's probably the fastest player on the Gophers team. They gave him a speed of 89 on the game. Hoskins is likely the fastest player on the team, but he has 12 players with a speed rating above his, including 7 wide receivers ahead of him. So I thought that was a little wild. They clearly didn't do their homework there. Now, Dragan Kesich, big drop here was that they made him a righty in the game, and he is a lefty in real life, so they dropped the ball there. And then another player I think they absolutely dogged was Greg Johnson. By the ratings, as a young Gopher who played as a true freshman, they listed him below Philip Daniels, who has not played and was lower in his recruiting rankings. They have him listed below Ashton Beers, Tony Nelson, Jerome Williams, all players who haven't seen the field yet, and they were lower ranked recruits heading into this. So I don't know what EA has against Greg Johnson, but they got that one wrong. But overall, the game is fun. It's good to see the Gophers on there, and hopefully in updates, they will get a little bit more respect, but it's not bad as a whole. Now, the final thing we're going to talk about today is the Gophers' latest NBA draft pick in Cam Christie and how he is doing in the Summer League. That's what's coming up next. All right, Gophers fans, let's talk about Cam Christie and how he is doing in the NBA Summer League, because Cam is exactly what we thought he would be and could be, especially in his first experiences in the NBA. He can find good minutes, he can find buckets, and he can contribute, but he's still going to need time to develop before being able to be a dominant scoring option or even in the Summer League. Now, over the course of 3 games in the Summer League so far, game 1 versus Denver, he had 26 minutes played, 3 for 12 shooting, 8 points, 2 assists, 3 rebounds, and he was a 15 plus when it came to the plus minus. Now, when you go to game 2, a little bit worse on the shooting, similar minutes, 25 minutes, 2 of 8 shooting, 6 points, 3 steals, 2 rebounds, and a plus 9 overall. And then in game 3, his best scoring effort so far, 27 minutes, 4 of 13 shooting, 13 points, 1 assist, 3 rebounds, and 1 steal. And also a plus 9 on the day. So overall, he has been a plus player for the Clippers. The Clippers have won all 3 games so far in the Summer League, and he is just one of 5 key players that are getting a ton of minutes on this Clippers Summer League roster. Now, this is a team that is looking for developmental players as their roster starts to age out. James Harden is only going to be here for a short amount of time. Kawhi Leonard and his health, who knows how long we have. Russell Westbrook might not be on this team anymore. So they're starting to age out, and they are going to need a young core of guys to step up and fill those spots and fill bigger roles as they can continue to go over these next 3 years. I think Cam Christie is proving he can be a core player. He has played some solid defense across the games. He has also shown to play as a 3-and-D player, which could be very helpful in his transition to wanting to get into the rotation. And as he gets more confident with his shot, it will drop even more. And that is where his value can really take off. Now, I think he will likely see a lot of G League play in his first season, but his development could go faster than a lot of people might think. At this point next year in the Summer League, I would not be surprised at all if we see Cam Christie absolutely dominate, put up like a couple 20-plus point games, maybe a 30-plus point game. I think Cam Christie can get there after a year of working with their shooting coaches, working with their strength and conditioning, working to get his feel of the speed of the game. And once he does that, I think he can be a quality player in the NBA, maybe work his way into a rotation. Now, many Clippers fans are stoked about having Cam Christie on their team, and they're stoked about his shot. I've seen many clips, I've seen many tweets of fans talking about, we have Klay at home, meaning they have their version of Klay Thompson, and that Cam Christie can be the Clippers' homegrown Klay Thompson, whom the Clippers had approached as trying to add him when they lost Paul George. So you love to see that. The Clippers fans excited, and we know what his upside is here with the Gophers. So good progress overall for Cam Christie. And hopefully that is a recruiting opportunity for the Minnesota Golden Gophers that they can continue to flaunt for the next few classes, starting with Amari Allen, who took notice of Cam Christie's play, could play a very similar role to Cam Christie and has the Gophers uniquely in his considerations. And he could play a very similar role for Minnesota in the class of 2025. So great development for Ben Johnson and staff. And I believe Ben Johnson was with Cam Christie on the draft days as well. So that relationship is good and supportive. And I'm looking forward to seeing what Cam Christie continues to do in his journey in the NBA. That's going to do it for us on today's episode of Locked On Golden Gophers. I appreciate you listening. Be sure to hit subscribe over on YouTube. And as always, row the boat, Sky Uma, go Gophers, and don't forget to hit subscribe.